The 2024 vice presidential debate, the only vice presidential debate in this cycle, is officially in the books. Hosted by CBS News in their studios in New York City, it was moderated by CBS Evening News anchor Norah O'Donnell and Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. Both did a very good job. I think they did a really good job on moderating this debate, giving each candidate optimal time and chances to respond to one another, and overall keeping things on track and moving along. There were a few hiccups there where candidates kind of wanted to go over, but they did a really good job of kind of reeling them in. We got to hear from J.D. Vance and Tim Walz on their different stances on policy issues. I do want to preface that this debate is not for people who support Harris or support Trump. It's more so for people that those two candidates are unable to reach. So voters that Vance could potentially bring in and other voters that Walz could potentially bring in. So this debate was actually really good. I enjoyed it overall. I thought it was extremely civil. They did a really good job of articulating their thoughts. So one of the largest topics of this election cycle is immigration. So what Trump is running on with immigration is that he wants to have mass deportations carried out by the U.S. military. The moderators asked Vance what that means and explaining more in detail. And he kind of just deferred to how Harris has let millions and millions and millions of illegal immigrants across the border and how that is taking away from resources for the American people. So there was a bill drafted by Senator Langford, a conservative from Oklahoma, that was essentially everything that the Republicans wanted. Some of the key things in that legislation was increased funding for border security measures, such as resources for personnel, surveillance, technology, and barriers to reduce illegal immigration, and also fast tracking some of the asylum applications so that people aren't waiting years and years before their asylum hearings and can get it done in 90 days. At the final moment, Trump pressured Republicans to vote down this bill because he wanted something to campaign on, although some Republicans criticized the funding measures within the bill for Israel and Ukraine and said that was ultimately what caused the bill to fall apart. And Harris has said multiple times that if she is elected, she will bring it back and sign it into law. I think a better question probably would have been, why did you, Senator Vance, vote against this bill at the time? I think that would have put much more responsibility on him to answer the question instead of trying to flip the script, which he did, to Harris and talk about how she has enabled Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in the U.S. and turn children into drug mules. But during her tenure as Attorney General from 2011 to 2017, Harris worked on combating transnational criminal organizations, which is what Walz rebutted with. So while she was Attorney General of California, there was this initiative called the California Transnational Organized Crime Task Force, which aimed at combating gangs and cartels involved in drug smuggling and other illicit affairs. So both candidates really did agree that the immigration situation is something that severely needs to be addressed. So to piggyback off of immigration on the issue of housing, Vance argued that the influx of illegal migrants has led to prices being driven up, and that was the number one key reason why. So Trump has been advocating for seizing federal lands to build more housing, deregulation, and giving tax breaks to incentivize people to go out and purchase homes. So this map shows the land that the federal government currently owns, which is around 640 million acres or 28% of the land mass of the United States. And some of the states don't have a lot of federal land. So in more popular areas that people want to live in or that have better job opportunities, there's not a lot of room to build more housing in and around a city. And Walz did talk about this, how there's not much federal land around Minneapolis. So where is this going to come from? The land highlighted in yellow, that is currently managed by the Bureau of Land Management, which Congress has tasked with a mandate of managing public lands for a variety of uses such as energy development, livestock grazing, recreation, and timber harvesting, while ensuring natural, cultural, and historic resources are maintained for present and future use. This is probably the only land that could be used because the rest are forest services, national parks, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Department of Defense. So also, there's just not a lot of space to build, like Iowa, Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, Illinois. There's just not a lot of federal land that more housing could be built upon. So that is kind of an issue that they'll really have to articulate a little bit better on how they want to help the housing crisis, because illegal migrants coming into this country are not the reason why housing prices are being driven up. And although, yes, it is true that anyone can purchase a home in the US regardless of their immigration status, it is often difficult if you don't have the proper documentation. So there are a few things that you need to purchase a home in the United States. You have to have a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number. If you don't have any of those, there are different paths for you to obtain a mortgage loan to purchase a home. The first being an ITIN loan. So these loans are designed specifically for people who do not have this kind of documentation. But this mortgage option tends to be a lot more expensive for borrowers. They usually have to put at least 20% down and show sufficient income and assets to be able to afford the mortgage payment. It's highly unlikely that people who are fleeing to the US for a better life or to claim asylum already have this income or these kind of assets. Harris has been pushing for a $25,000 down payment assistance program for first-time homebuyers. And although a lot of people see this as great for those who have not been able to get into the housing market, it doesn't really benefit the people who are already in their homes and kind of struggling to make the mortgage payments. Walls did talk about the benefits of a VA home loan, which are really good. However, to get one, you have to be a US military member, a veteran, or married to one. So back in June, NPR published an article talking about how home prices have hit a record high and cite a few different reasons why. The first being that not many people are buying or selling their homes. The second is interest rates being pretty high, which they have come down a bit, but they are still more than twice what they were before the pandemic. There are just not a lot more homes being built. Builders aren't building homes like they used to. Builders broke ground on 5.2% fewer single-family homes in May of this year than they did in April. Building permits for future construction were also down 2.9%. Another big reason why there are more limited housing is not because migrants are coming in and they're being given away to them for free. It's outside companies and investors coming into different states and purchasing up single family homes to turn them into rentals, like this Ohio company that has become Omaha, Nebraska's biggest landlord. From January 2020 through September 2021, Vinebrook, which is an Ohio-based company that owns $2.4 billion in assets, bought more Douglas County single family homes than anyone else, according to data from the Douglas County Registrar and Assessor of Deeds. The article is linked below if you want to check it out, especially if you live here in Nebraska. This doesn't even include investors who are able to purchase a home in cash, flip it and list it for an insane price to turn a profit. So one of the other important topics of this debate was abortion, and J.D. Vance did a really good job of talking about how the Republican Party needs to do a better job of building up trust with the American people, that they do have their best interests at heart, and that this is in no way to try to take away women's rights, but to protect families. However, that's pretty hard to do when Trump runs around, brags, and takes credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade because of his Supreme Court picks. So during the debate, Walz claimed that Project 2025 calls for a pregnancy registry, which is not true. According to a fact check by the AP, the conservative initiative calls for the collection of, quote, accurate and reliable statistical data about abortion, abortion survivors, and abortion-related maternal deaths, but not a record of every pregnancy that occurs. Also, Vance did misconstrue Walz's 2023 bill that he signed in Minnesota, saying that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. So that is not actually the language of the bill that Walz signed. The current version of the law and the 2015 version that was amended state that, quote, an infant who is born alive shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. So in every single state, including Minnesota, infanticide is criminalized, and this bill does not change that. So Walz did a really good job of talking about women who were directly impacted by these abortion laws in different states, specifically Amber Thurman, a 28-year-old medical assistant from Georgia who developed an infection after her body did not fully expel the tissue after taking abortion pills. So she was in a hospital in delayed care, and the infection spread to the point where it did take her life. He also did talk about Amanda Zarowski, who's a Texas woman who was denied an abortion after having pregnancy complications, which ultimately led her to develop sepsis and almost die. She and a group of other women and doctors filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas due to the 6-week abortion ban. She has spoke at the DNC, has been featured in different campaign ads. A reporting team I was on actually went out to her house and we interviewed her and her husband Josh on their story for our investigation of America After Roe. If you want to check that out, it's also in the description box below. So the last question was about the 2020 election and the state of American democracy. And take a listen to what J.D. Vance said when he was asked this question.
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation.
So certifying an election is much more of a procedural thing, and what Trump wanted to do with replacing electors was just completely illegal. There's a great documentary I watched the other day from the perspective of Trump officials and Republicans in other states, including former Arizona House of Representatives Speaker Rusty Bowers, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, and his Chief Operating Officer Gabriel Sterling, recounting how Trump and his team's actions fueled everything leading up to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And when Jim Acosta of CNN asked senior Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski about the 2020 election, this is what he had to say.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? Can you answer that?
Jim, I think it's very simple. The American people have passed the 2020 election. They're focused on an election which is just under 5 weeks away. And what we have an opportunity to do now is to talk about two different visions for America. And what J.D. Vance laid out last night is a very different vision than what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris want to say. So, look, we can go back and relitigate the 2020 election, or we can look at what we can do to make America better for the everyday Americans who are struggling under Bidenomics.
Yeah,
They're struggling
Corey,
under...
It's not relitigating. It's just a simple question. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? I mean, that's an easy
Jim,
one.
why are we talking about 2020 anymore? Does the American people care about the 2020 election anymore, or do they care about being able to put food on their table, gas in their car, home
I think
heating
one
oil
reason
in
why
their...
it's coming up, Corey, is because the former president has said on the campaign trail repeatedly that there was all this widespread fraud in 2020. That was not the case. And he's also teeing up the same kinds of challenges after this election. It hasn't even happened yet. So it is a very relevant question.
This debate was more so for undecided voters to get more familiar with the vice presidential candidates. Do I think it's going to sway them a whole lot? Probably not overall. I think people already knew who they're going to vote for, but just needed that extra nudge. Let's take a look at some of the polling that CBS and YouGov did immediately after the debate. In terms of who won the debate, Vance or Walz, 42% say J.D. Vance did win over Tim Walz's 41%, and 17% said it was a tie. And I think that Vance did a really, really good job. He was very articulate. He got his points across. Did he answer questions fully? Not really. From my observation, Tim Walz was shaky at the beginning, but he did get stronger when he found his footing with abortion and democracy. 88% of the debate watchers thought the tone was generally positive, to 12% saying generally negative. So that's a really good ratio there. I think that this debate was odd to watch just because we have become so used to the debates turning into this spectacle where both sides are just attacking each other and just getting these super clips that go extremely viral online and become TikTok sounds and all of that. And so on the question of who sounded most reasonable, 74% said that Walz sounded reasonable to Vance's 65%, and 26% found Walz extreme to Vance's 35%. So here's another metric on who debate watchers thought did a better job on different talking points. On abortion, Walz was at 62% with Vance at 38%. Healthcare, Walz at 59% with Vance at 41%. Both were split 50-50 on the conflict in the Middle East. So Vance at 51% on the economy to Walz's 49%. And on immigration, 52% Vance, 48% Walz. But both candidates did see a spike in their favorability ratings. So the opinion of Tim Walz before the debate was at 52% favorable and 41% unfavorable, with 6% saying they haven't heard enough about him, to 60% favorable, 35% unfavorable, with 5% saying they haven't heard enough. Before the debate, Vance had a favorability rating of 40%, which went up to 49% after the debate. He had a 54% unfavorability rating, which went down to 47%, and 7% before the debate said they haven't heard enough, and after the debate, it was only 4%. The vice president is a tiebreaker in the Senate, represents the U.S. in different affairs, and steps into the role of President of the United States if need be. And ultimately, 60% of debate watchers believe that Walz was much more prepared to step into the role of President of the United States if needed, to Vance's 55%. Alexa, how many days until November 5th?
Tuesday, November 5th, 2024 is in 34 days.
We have 34 days until Election Day. Hurry up and make your decision if you have not yet. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below on what you think about all of this and how you feel heading into Election Day. And if you have not yet, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so that you never miss an upload. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.